Hello and welcome to Dan Explains. I'm Dan. In a previous video done on SpaceX's Starship, I mentioned it would refuel in orbit to improve its capability to bring people and cargo to places like the Moon and Mars. Pretty much the whole Starship program hinges on the ability to refuel in orbit. Well, how would that even work? Would you only need one propellant tanker launch to refuel? How long would it take? Would people going to Mars have to wait weeks in low Earth orbit? Let me explain. There's been a lot of confusion over this whole Starship refueling thing. Hey, wait, aren't they loading oxidizer as well as fuel? So aren't they really talking about propellant, not only fuel? So repropellanting, maybe? Anyway, there's a lot of confusion about it. Not helped in the least bit by SpaceX constantly changing how they plan to actually refuel every time someone asks. I'll go over those changes in a minute, but first I'd like to clear up some things that are not moving targets. I think many people just naively assume when starships refuel in orbit that it'll only take one starship to fully refuel another, similar to how fighter jets refuel in midair using a tanker. Well, that's not even close to true. Depending on how they design the tanker, it could take anywhere from 7 tanker launches, if they have a tanker that's highly optimized for carrying fuel, to 16 tanker launches if they don't reach their efficiency goals with Starship, and the tankers are essentially the same thing as the cargo Starship. Starship being fully reusable should help mitigate the costs of all this. With fully expendable rockets, if you tried to refuel a spaceship, the costs would shoot up really fast. But that's a topic for another video. The cost of a fully fueled Starship in low Earth orbit should come in between $15 and $50 million. US, of course. That's a big range, I know, but there are lots of unknowns at the moment. At any rate, even at $50 million, that's still cheaper than NASA's SLS, which will be over $1 billion a launch, and it only puts up a tiny payload in comparison, when taking refueling into account, of course. Okay, this isn't a rag on SLS video, but it is a really big waste of money. It takes a while to set up and launch a rocket, so you're probably thinking 7 to 16 refueling flights is a bit extreme. According to SpaceX's own proposal to NASA for the Artemis lunar lander contract, they state it'll take 16 launches at a rate of 1 a week. So the lunar Starship that's going to go to the moon is sitting in space for at least 15 weeks before it can leave for the moon. Now I think they put that in the proposal because they wanted to be as conservative as possible. The head of SpaceX, Elon Musk, has since said it probably won't take that many launches. Even if it didn't, that's a long wait anyway. Well, the solution for that is to launch the people on a different rocket later. That's what Artemis is doing, since they will be launched on an SLS rocket and fly in Orion to the moon, before landing on the moon using Starship. You don't need to use SLS, of course, but NASA already spent billions of dollars on SLS, so anyway, ideally, you would launch and fuel a tanker Starship in orbit till it was almost full. Then lastly, you'd launch your crewed vehicle, which then fills all the way up in one transfer from the tanker. Based on their lunar lander proposal, it seems like SpaceX is designing some kind of propellant depot as well. But it was redacted from the document, so that's just speculation. If that were the case, then Starship fueling up would be more like a mid-air refueling of fighter jets, like I mentioned earlier. You'd still need lots of launches though, since the tanker Starships still need to get the fuel up there. But you could keep sending those up at a pretty steady rate to keep the propellant depot stocked up. The propellant depot could also hold more propellant too, because it wouldn't ever need to return to Earth. Okay, now, how would this refueling actually work? Well, that seems a bit more fuzzy. Back when Starship was called the Interplanetary Transport System, or ITS, the idea was to get it fueled up side by side, like in this animation from SpaceX. Later, while Starship was in its Big Falcon rocket, or BFR stage, they switched over to refueling butt to butt, like in this SpaceX animation. It stayed that way for quite some time, until just a few months ago, when, according to Elon Musk, they have since switched back to the side-by-side method of refueling again. They don't have an animation for the updated design, so I can only show you the ITS one right now. In fact, this could be wrong, although Elon didn't confirm, and he also didn't deny when it was suggested that Starship would now refuel pointing in the opposite direction rather than pointing in the same direction. Elon may have an affinity to that arrangement because of his sense of humor. However, I think that would add some unnecessary complexity. So, even if they have made that decision, I think that we'll swap back to the side-by-side method with both ships pointing in the same direction anyway. Why all the confusion and the swapping around? Well, it probably has to do with the weight and the internal design changes. Initially, they started by depicting them refueling side by side, probably just due to the assumption that the booster and the ship would be fueled the same way the Falcon 9 is fueled by the ground support equipment now, from the side through a quick disconnect. I think they switched from the side-by-side refueling to this butt-to-butt refueling because it seemed like it would be a simpler design. No need for a quick disconnect inside Starship. You could just pump the propellant up what's called the downcomer pipes that bring the liquid propellant down to the engines when it's taking off. Also, it would be easier to generate flow by spinning the Starships in that configuration. You'd fuel the ship and booster together through a quick disconnect on the booster only. The drawback to this, of course, is you have to run 2 pipes all the way down the booster for the propellant to do that. That adds weight, which is probably one of the major reasons they switched back to the side-by-side design. Also, a quick disconnect near the hot engines may be a bit of a hazard, which could have played into the decision as well. The SN4 mishap was caused by issues with the quick disconnect. So, if they do go with the side-by-side method, how will it work? Well, first off, I don't think Elon will let his sense of humor get the best of him, and they'll go with the side-by-side refueling method as depicted in the old ITS videos. This gives them a few advantages over the other methods, and they have less extra plumbing, which means less extra weight. Elon stated in an interview with Tim Dodd, also known as the Everyday Astronaut. Actually, Elon kind of redesigned the Starship on the fly during that conversation. Linked to the video in the description. The Starship could maneuver using tank ullage pressure by venting it through ports on the side of the ship. Ullage pressure, for those who don't know, is the propellant in the tank that is in a gas form rather than a liquid. If they refuel, like how it's depicted in the ITS video, they could vent some of the pressure sideways, so that the starships accelerate in the direction of the tanker starship, creating a small amount of apparent gravity, kind of like I mentioned in my artificial gravity video, link in the description. They would be connected via their quick disconnect ports that they use to fuel the starships on the ground. That way, the propellant could just flow down through the quick disconnect ports from the tanker starship and into the starship that's being refueled. Obviously, if they had a dedicated propellant depot, they would probably have a better system using pumps or something, since you don't have to launch that once, so you wouldn't be wasting much propellant on launching an unneeded extra pump every single launch. It would make refueling of manned starships much faster as well. I don't really have time to speculate about that in this video, so maybe I'll do another one on that one sometime. So how do you think SpaceX will achieve this? Or will they not even be able to get that far? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please press the like button, subscribe to my channel, and ding the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Also, please support me on Patreon, link in the description. The more people support me, the more time I can dedicate to making videos like this one. So, until next time, have a great week.